Speaksies.
So I went to Arby's today, and I didn't plan to go to Arby's. It just happened.
I think that happens to most people unless they plan a Arby's night like Putty. Arby's just kind of happens to you.
You took the words out of my mouth. I don't think people plan to go to Arby's. Maybe they do. I don't think I've ever planned to go to Arby's. I just needed to get out of the house, and I knew we were recording tonight. I didn't want to be hangry because I've realized that days if we record when I haven't eaten all day, like before we start, I'm feeling already a little like on edge. So I left the house, and I've been inside so much. I mean, how often are you getting out of the house?
I'm getting around my neighborhood like an area that's starting to get a little bit like it's not, the adventure is gone, especially with the cold weather. Nothing is exciting outside when it's cold.
Right. I agree. And it's weird. Like, it's almost like going to an alien landscape sometimes. I've been in the house for like 2 or 3 days, because I'm working from home. When I don't have my kids, I'm not taking them to school and stuff.
Right.
And I'm trying to be good, not spend money. I want to cook food I bought and eat that and not be eating out. But today I just was like, I need to leave this house. So got out of the house, got in the car, didn't have a plan of where to go, and saw that Arby's sign. Yeah. And just said, okay, I am supposed to be on a weight loss journey. Right. But it's just a little detour. I mean, the journey has detours on it.
You took an exit on the journey.
That's right. It took the Arby's exit.
Yeah.
But tell me if this bothers you or you like it.
Please.
I got caught off guard because they did that thing where I pull up, and part of the appeal of fast food to me is you really don't have to interact with a human being face to face.
Right.
Especially now that you can just sort of hand your card in the thing and you got masks on. I was really thrown off. I pulled into Arby's, and it was like some kid holding, wanting to stop me and take my order in line, face to face. And I hate that because it's like, I feel more shamed. And then I don't know what to do because I pretty much know what's on the Arby's menu. But I'm torn between, do I ask for a menu? Like I don't want to look like the fat ass that like knows the menu backwards and forwards. So, and then once I get the menu, I feel stupid because it's like, what, you don't know what's at Arby's? But I realized like I didn't want to buy too much because this person is looking right in my face and they know like this fatty is about to eat everything he orders. So I'm just like, I'll just have a regular roast beef, So maybe it is good for the weight loss journey to have the face to face. But I just kind of felt silently judged throughout the whole thing.
Well, I think if anyone's going to judge you, they're not going to be at an Arby's. I would say that's a judgment-free zone. I would hope that any quick serve or fast food restaurant serves you your calories without a side of judgment. That seems to be unnecessary. Not good for business.
I guess so. I felt a little judged, but you're right. They probably aren't thinking about me that much. So yeah. And before we get started, I just want to say a big thank you to our 2 most recent Speaksy supporters, Rachel and Bill. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. So welcome to Origin of Speaksies. My name is Scott. I'm here alongside my good friend Steve. And Steve, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, we're going to talk about some what I consider almost kind of classic idioms. I was inspired by our interview with Billy Mitchell, or actually part of my research I did for Billy Mitchell. As we know, multiple world record holder for Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. Yep. And I remember as I was researching the history of Donkey Kong, the game starts with Donkey Kong stealing Mario's girlfriend. Right. And the classic trope of damsel in distress. So what we're going to look at today are some, I'd say almost more than idioms, just kind of tropes almost of damsel in distress and knight in shining armor. We're going to talk about the etymology of both terms. Okay. Talk about how they're used in literature and entertainment, and also what these terms mean today. In our current times, these are kind of traditional male and female roles, and just going to see how that, how that interacts with our current environment and just the landscape of today.
Well, I'll be interested to see if you have thoughts on this, like if those tropes happen anymore. Right. I mean, I'd be interested. I feel like you'd get a lot of heat for either one of those, but maybe not.
Well, we'll see. I think it's one of the themes that we'll see here is just kind of the reason why they're tropes, is the way that they resonate. And also, are we fighting back against maybe our own instincts and making them problematic or controversial? Yeah. So when I think of these terms, I think of castles, I think of knights, I think of chivalry. To set some context, let's talk about what chivalry is.
Okay.
So we're going to go to the Cambridge Dictionary. Their definition, first one they list is very polite, honest, and kind behavior, especially by men towards women.
Yeah.
Second definition they provide is the system of behavior followed by knights in the medieval period of history that put a high value on honor, kindness, and courage.
Okay.
So
it's officially from that era.
Yeah. And as some of the research I did, I think, as with all things in the past, are maybe a little bit more romanticized than actually were.
Right.
The idea of knights were used to kind of codify these values and actions into society. I'm going to say some words I didn't think I'd ever say. I'm going to go to the Urban Dictionary, and I actually like what the Urban Dictionary has to say. I think it shed some light on this topic to give us some more context. So the top definition from Urban Dictionary of chivalry: being courteous and polite without whining or asking for anything in return.
That's good.
So I think that's another way to say it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not really chivalry if you're going on a date and you are holding the door, opening the door, do people even like scoot the chair out anymore? I don't know. But you're doing all that stuff. But if it's because you're trying to get something in return, that's not chivalrous.
Exactly.
That's dastardly.
That is.
If we're going to use old school terms.
I like that. I think that is. And when you say dastardly, I can see a damsel in distress somewhere with a guy with a spindly mustache.
Yes.
Victimizing her. Mm-hmm. So again, things I didn't think I'd say. Here's the second definition from Urban Dictionary, which is actually pretty good. So here you go.
Okay.
From the old French word for knighthood, the art of being a chevalier, a knight or horseman. This was originally a system by which mounted warriors were to act, but while service to their people is touched upon, the general goal of medieval knights was not saving many a damsel in distress, devotion to God, or enforcing justice. Most knights define chivalry as warfare and obtaining fame and fortune in the name of their kings without any display of cowardice in battle. So don't know if that's accurate, but and there's actually multiple paragraphs in this definition from Urban Dictionary.
Okay, that came from Urban Dictionary.
Yeah, but it is Urban Dictionary, and I think the third definition kind of gives us a little bit more of a modern take on it. Something women complain is dead, even though it cannot logically exist in an equal society, which is something women wanted. It's one or the other. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that view, but I think that kind of gives a little bit of insight into the modern perspective of chivalry.
But it's weird, though, because when you read the first definition, I think this was also from Urban Dictionary, about, it was basically like, be polite and kind, which is unassailably a good thing. But then it said, especially men to women, which is interesting. So I think, I don't think, chivalry, that's an interesting thing, right? Chivalry is dead, but there's this sort of like played out thing of like, oh, we can't even open doors for girls. I think most women are fine if you open the door for them. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if they yell at you or something and don't like it, they're just, they suck. You know what I mean?
I've gotten a stink eye for holding a door open before. And that for me is.
Yeah. If you're listening now and you're a woman and you do that, you suck. That's come on.
Now, I don't know if that's the most
I'll say it. Yes.
Chivalrous way to say it.
Yes. And if a woman holds a door for me, I'm fine with that too.
There we go.
There we go. Equality. Yeah.
So what is a damsel in distress? According to Wikipedia, the damsel in distress is a classic theme in world literature, art, film, and video games, most notably in the more action-packed. This trope involves beautiful, innocent, or helpless young female leads placed in a dire predicament by villain, monster, or alien, and who requires a male hero to achieve her rescue. So the etymology of this term, first we're going to go to Etym and define what damsel is. Early 13th century, young unmarried woman, especially a maiden of gentle birth, also maid in waiting, handmaiden, assisting a lady, very ladylike. Another also references the Old French term demoiselle, woman of noble birth.
I was just thinking like damsel, that's not, you would only hear that term now if you were saying damsel in distress, I think. I don't think anyone uses the term damsel.
It's tough to use when you're not saying damsel in distress.
Right.
So who was the first person to use damsel in distress? And from the same article, the English term damsel in distress itself first seems to have appeared in Richard Ames' 1692 poem, Sylvia's Complaint of Her Sex's Unhappiness.
Oh.
So we'll talk a little bit later that the idea of this as a trope has been around a long time, but the actual use of the term damsel in distress comes back to a 1692 poem. So you might ask, who is Richard Ames? Well,
who is Richard Ames? I don't know.
Thank you for asking. No. I'll tell you. I found a one-sentence description of him, and I love this guy. The printer John Dutton reports that Richard Ames, a now forgotten Desian of Grub Street, was originally a, quote, coat seller, and that, quote, wine and women were the great bane of his life and happiness.
Okay.
So I think that's a great one-word obituary of somebody there.
Oh, that's I like that too. I should have put that. That would be like a good yearbook quote,
Not as good as Big Meat, but it's a good, Big Meat's obituary, I think, is maybe the best one. We need to bring that back sometime.
Also, if wine and women are your bane of your existence or whatever, that's kind of on you, right? Like, you don't just get attacked by wine and women. You had to have a hand in that as well. Yeah. Also, Grub Street sounds very familiar. Maybe it's an app or something. But I was thinking about there's Grub Street writers or something. I don't know. I'll look at that.
I was thinking of Arby's when you said that. Yeah? Maybe that would be a good place for an Arby's to be.
We've got the grub. Yeah, I could see that.
So the actual quote is from, again, his poem, Mr. Ames's poem, Sylvia's Complaint of Her Sexes. And I shall read part of it for you right now. If one of us a lovely youth has seen, and straight some tender thoughts to feel begin, which liking does not insensibly improve, itself to longing, fond, impatient love, the damsel in distress must still remain, tortured and racked with the tormenting pain.
There it is, damsel in distress.
Yeah, and a guy that you would think, wine and women.
Right.
That sounds like something that someone would write.
Yeah, even though I really tried, I closed my eyes. I was trying to follow what was being said there, and I couldn't. I think it's just too many. It was just too many words together that I was trying to figure out what the point of it was. But it did end up saying something about damsel in distress. So,
and if it makes you feel better too, that was on page 12 of the poem. So
yeah, well, thank you for starting on that page.
I think I think I demonstrated chivalry.
Yeah.
To everyone.
You did.
By not reading that whole thing.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, Richard Ames's big contribution to literature. However, it's not his only one.
Oh, what else did he do?
So here's some other titles from Richard Ames.
Bring it on.
The Pleasures of Love and Marriage, a poem. A dialogue between claret and Derby ale.
Okay.
Isn't claret a wine?
Yeah. Claret is like a red wine, right?
Yeah. So we have Love and Marriage.
Right. You
wine
got the wine
versus
and
beer.
The bane of his life. Yeah.
Yeah. An elegy upon the death of that brave sea commander, Rear Admiral Carter.
Nice.
I like that just because it has Rear Admiral.
Anything with the Rear Admiral, I agree.
Yeah. The character of a bigoted prince.
Wow.
I like this. This guy might have been woke before that was a thing.
Absolutely.
I'm going to see if I can find his Twitter, see what hashtags he used. However, before we compliment him too much, an auction of whores.
That's not very woke.
Yeah.
Auction of sex workers.
Yeah, and that would be better.
Still bad. Yeah, it's still bad if you're auctioning them off. Wow.
So Richard Ames,
he had a lot of range. Well, not really. It was all about, except for the Rear Admiral thing. I do like that it's all about wine and women, auctioning off whores, the pleasures of marriage or whatever.
Love and marriage.
Which actually, I think that was what our sex education was called. That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
At, the school we went
if
to.
You remember who taught me, a Rear Admiral was probably involved also.
Yes. How could I forget? That kind of ties it all together. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, we'll leave that going.
You know what? Post game,
we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yes.
So as I mentioned before, I think the damsel in distress is almost a trope. And when you think of examples of it, there are almost so many, it's tough to name a few. So even though the term was defined in 1692, you see it in literature and art for years and years.
Right.
Going back, Andromeda and Perseus from times of Greek myths was also the basis of Clash of the Titans. Every Disney princess, pretty much, until the last few years. And King Kong, we'll come back up here in just a few minutes, but King Kong inspired a whole lot of, giant monster taking beautiful woman know, for films and video games.
Well, I was going to say, and you started with the talking about our conversation with Billy Mitchell and Donkey Kong and King Kong. It all kind of ties together there. You know, I was thinking about this, and obviously there's the Disney stuff, there's the old literature stuff. So I was trying to think about, is that something? Because even like you said, the Disney, I don't think, and I'm not a big Disney guy, I haven't watched anything recent, but I'm guessing they don't do damsels in distress anymore. They're all like, can do it on their own or whatever. But I was thinking about the movie Pretty Woman, because that kind of is the same trope. I mean, she's a prostitute or sex worker or whatever, but you know, Richard Gere shows up and then kind of somewhat saves her from that. I mean, and then even to the point where at the end he shows up on like a white horse and it's like way over the top. But I mean, there are a lot of rom-coms like that, but I think a lot of that was based on was influenced by Pretty Woman in that scene. And
he does show up like a knight in shining armor, foreshadowing.
Yes, exactly.
So pretty tropish. So going to tvtropes.org, I like the way that some of the terms that they use to define this. And here's one paragraph. This is a type of living MacGuffin chained to a rock as an ancient form of it. Something that I think is one of the reasons this exists too is that it moves a story along. Yes. You need a reason to have your protagonist battle something and have a confrontation. Right. And I think that's something that gets lost a little bit. And we'll talk about that some more as we talk about how this fits into the modern world.
Well, and there are tons of like 70s and 80s movies with this sort of trope too. You know, like, well, I mean, obviously Princess Bride is in there, but like a bunch of sort of like fantasy kind of like Beastmaster. You know, I'm just trying to think of like, there were a bunch of those movies in like the 70s and 80s, and they all did. And when you said the MacGuffin thing, it got me thinking, I'm like, yeah, that was pretty much the device for a lot of these movies was hero either knows this girl, meets this girl, whatever, for whatever reason has to go on this journey, which that's another whole thing is the hero's journey and the buildings Roman or whatever. It almost always centered around a damsel in distress.
So as we've talked about this is something that's very classic literature, classic movies. I mean, not classic movies, all movies. I mean, most
Beastmaster is a classic movie.
But I mean, Star Wars even, you know, Luke Skywalker goes to get the princess in the tower, later gives her a West Virginia surprise, but that's a whole other thing we'll discuss later.
That hasn't aged well.
No, that scene has not. So to get where this trope kind of fits in our modern era, I'm going to go to a web series called Tropes versus Women in Video Games, a YouTube series created by Anita Sarkeesian. She examines gender tropes in video games. So I watched her first video, which is based on Damsel in Distress. Okay. And some interesting ideas that she had about this. She talks about some of the things from a feminist perspective that kind of are negative regarding the damsel in distress. She talks about how it disempowers female characters and robs them of a chance to be heroes in their own right. Also talks about how Donkey Kong was inspired by King Kong and the whole trope of King Kong grabbing, you know, the screaming Fay Wray, and how that was brought into video games by Donkey Kong and pretty much became the template. Yeah. Other comments that she made, it reinforces the framing of women as a possession that's been stolen from the protagonist, and it's an easy way for developers to tap into adolescent male power fantasies. And one last quote, you know, it's in the game of the patriarchy, women are not the opposing team, they are the ball. So I think we've heard the phrase before, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think with this, that if you're looking to be offended or to, you know, find the patriarchy anywhere, you're gonna find it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So I understand the point she's making, but you have to remember that in a lot of these movies, the princess or the damsel usually has a hand in her own saving. I mean, in most of these stories, I mean, I'm thinking of movies. I'm thinking of like the Three Amigos. I mean, that's another great one where they need to save the I don't remember the lady's name, the Mexican woman from Santapulco, you know, from El Guapo. I mean, she steps in, and actually the heroes are kind of bumbling idiots in that one. So I mean, you know, it's not the damsel in distress also usually has a hand in her own liberation.
And I would disagree just with her premise too. The idea of women as a possession that's been stolen from the protagonist. Again, we talked about the term living MacGuffin. You know, you need a reason for your protagonist to go into action. Right. why not it be a person he cares for?
Yeah.
It makes that personal connection. It resonates with human decency and man's instinct to defend and protect his tribe.
Well, and you're also looking through it through one lens, and that is the lens of sex or gender, when in fact the person that probably kidnapped the damsel in distress was a bad man, or men or people, and this is a good man, chivalrous. Now, I mean, you could put women in there as well. I mean, you look at like Game of Thrones; they had some really badass women that were heroes too. I mean, but yeah, I just think the thing there is like understanding her point, but also like you're only looking at that from it's like criticizing literature and only looking at it through one lens. You got to look at it through multiple lenses. And
also to make sure I'm giving the correct context, a lot of what she was saying was about video games and giving examples from video games.
Well, that's right. You did
starting with the 80s. When I would say demographically, it was probably a very skewed towards male.
Double Dragon.
Crowd. Yeah.
Well, no, Double Dragon had some badass women in it too that had like the chains that were like, trying to kill you. So, but no, that's true. Bad Dudes. That was another good one.
Was that like a Double Dragon ripoff?
It was. And Bad Dudes was my favorite. And it was a Double Dragon ripoff, but I really wanted that Nintendo game and never got it. So
in summary, damsel in distress is a term that refers to a woman who is generally used as a MacGuffin in a story, to drive the story along, to have the hero, the protagonist, perhaps the knight in shining armor that we'll discuss here in a few minutes, to be rescued. It's something we see in literature and culture for years. It was brought into the English lexicon in 1692. And it's something that still exists today, but doesn't necessarily fit very well with maybe more modern feminist interpretations of things. But then again, what does?
That's good. All right, you ready for some new slang?
I'm ready for some new slang.
Okay. Oh, man, I'm excited to do this one.
All right.
Steve, have you ever heard the term Glizzy Gobbler?
Glizzy Gobbler.
Glizzy Gobbler.
Normally when you bring up a new slang term, I've heard it in some sort of capacity. I have no idea. Is this actually a real new slang?
This is fresh. This is like hot off the... I mean, this is 2020 slang.
Okay.
It's been around for a little bit, but let me use it in a sentence and see if you can figure out what it means. From Urban Dictionary, of course. Yo, did you see that guy eat a hot dog? He's a real glizzy gobbler. I just gave you a really big clue about what it is.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you, unless you want to guess.
Is there other things that this person gobbles that are maybe reminiscent of a big bite?
You know what? If that was the case, I would probably not bring it to the table. So, actually, believe it or not, no. I mean, the term glizzy gobbler. First of all, I mean, we've talked before about how it's been said that cellar door is the most beautiful phrase in the English language. Cellar door, it's just beautiful to say. Glizzy Gobbler is right up there for me. I just want to say it. Glizzy Gobbler. So it's going to be said a lot.
Okay.
And anytime you can say gobbler, and this is where the PG-13-ish nature of our show, there is one of the hardest times I ever laughed was watching Office Space with your brother. And there's a part where they call Lumbergh a gobbler. And it was the first time I'd ever heard anything like that. And Chris and I just lost it and had to keep rewinding it. So I saw this term glizzy gobbler I saw it on a few memes, which memes I have a very complicated relationship with memes. I do think sometimes they're good and they're funny. And it's comedy. It's a way to make light of things going on. But I also kind of get really sick of them at times. I'm like, I just need a break from memes. These aren't that funny. These aren't that creative. And TikTok has ruined a lot of things as well, which I'll get to.
Yeah.
So I had seen this glizzy gobbler thing a few times and I was like, what is that? But I never actually looked it up. I just kind of tried to pretend I hadn't seen it, but it was still in the back of my mind. So I decided to look it up today. So according to Urban Dictionary, a glizzy gobbler is a person who completely dominates hot dogs during consumption.
Oh.
It is a hot dog. It is
Okay.
nothing dirty to, I mean, of course you can make it anything dirty. And this
Yeah.
is like, there's not a long way to go to make this dirty, but this is really not used in a overtly dirty way.
All right.
It really has to do with hot dogs. And I'll explain that. So, I mean, it's a handy phrase. It's something that could come in very handy. You're grilling out, you're having a few friends over. One of your friends is just like crushing a hot dog. Boom. Check out that Glizzy Gobbler over there. So what is Glizzy? I mean, gobbler, we know what that word means. What is a Glizzy? Well, a Glizzy is slang for a hot dog. And it was originally a slang term for gun in Washington, D.C. And by the way, there were actually a bunch of sources for this. I'm actually looking at intheknow.com about what is a Glizzy.
Mm-hmm.
It said, let's dig into the summer food trend that's taking over TikTok. So anyway, a Glizzy became a nickname for a hot dog in Washington, D.C. and even around Maryland and Northern Virginia. It was initially slang for a gun, of which there are many in D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that it extended to hot dogs is that the length of the hot dog that you buy from a hot dog stand is similar to the extended clip of a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently Glock is been called a Glizzy, and somehow that translated to hot dog.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think I was being punked on this, but again, multiple sources confirm. So it started to spread this past summer of 2020, mainly because of TikTok. So what I was going to say before is, I mean, I've done everything I can to stay away from TikTok, but what I kind of have realized recently is half the stuff on Instagram is just TikToks that people are posting on Instagram.
Yep.
Which makes me mad because I'm sitting here thinking I had avoided TikTok, but no, I'm just looking at it on another
you're a
platform.
Reels purist. So I know that you don't want to recycle TikTok on your Reels.
Yeah, Reels is okay. No,
Yeah.
Reels is horrible too. But so there was a TikTok that you may or may not have seen it. Do you recall ever seeing a TikTok or a Reels or something on Instagram or Twitter that has like a bunch of people trying to catch a hot dog in their mouth, like in slow motion? It's kind of funny, actually.
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, there's like 6 people, and they're one at a time. They're like trying to catch the hot dog. It slaps on their face. You know, it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Well, that got over like I think 2 million views, and then all of a sudden, other ones started popping up with the term Glizzy in it. So somebody created a Glizzy dispenser, which was an ice machine. When you push on the button to get ice, you get hot dogs coming out instead. There was a trend of Glizzy gobbling, which was just people sharing techniques of how to sneakily eat hot dogs in public. I mean, it really is bizarre, but this did become very popular. And just to wrap up Glizzy Gobbler, this term Glizzy has actually been around for a while, and it's really hard to do a new slang without bringing in rap.
Right.
There is a rapper from DC
All right.
named Shy Glizzy, and he's been around since 2011. He's still doing it.
Wow.
And so Shy Glizzy, part of the Glizzy gang, has been around for a long time.
Wow.
So this phrase Glizzy, or this term Glizzy, is now went from being a gun to being a hot dog to being a term for somebody that just is. And we had a guy that we worked with that you've heard many stories about who was the definition of a Glizzy Gobbler. We had there was like a hot dog bar or something, whatever, at work where people had brought in stuff. And rumor has it, or legend has it, that he ate about 8 hot dogs. So that would be a Glizzy Gobbler.
Glizzy Gobbler. So I have to say, I felt like I've contributed to having a streak of crabby old man when I hear new slang. I gotta say I like this one. It's about hot dogs. It's fun. It does have a little bit of a keeping with the tradition of going back to rap music, and just like the worst new slang we've ever done, clap back.
Yes,
another connects to guns.
Yeah,
but I gotta say I like this. It's about hot dogs. It's fun and gets you really close to being able to make a dick joke.
I like it too, and mainly for that reason is that I can say it with knowing that it really doesn't have dirty origins, even though it sounds like it.
Yeah,
so,
but maybe we can make it dirty.
I think we have.
I hope we have.
And that is today's new slang.
This is Robert Bankett, host of True Facts with Robert Bankett. True Facts with Robert Bankett is now available exclusively for Speak She supporters on Patreon. On each episode of True Facts with Robert Bankett, I will take us on a journey through the past and present on such topics as history, science, and literature. The Bankett family's long history of prominence in the United States and the old world has allowed me insight into the stories behind the stories. The true facts that are often purposely obscured by so-called professional historians and scientists who don't want you to know the truth. Here's a clip from Stonewall Jackson. Following the end of the Mexican-American War, Jackson found himself a soldier in a time of peace. Providence again arose in Stonewall's life as he was offered a position at the new Virginia Military Institute in Lexington, Virginia. The transition from battlefield to classroom was difficult for Jackson. While he was very versed in military history and theory, Jackson now had to teach other subjects, like physics and astronomy. His awkward manner and peculiar habits led to him at first becoming an unpopular and disliked teacher. His students soon began to mock him with nicknames behind his back, including Tom Fool, the Major, Buckethead Jackson, Puddinhead Goldfob, Big Dummy Murphy, Dexter Poopy Pants, Constantine Buttface, Cornelius Asspants, Jim Acosta, Robert E. Shitforbrains, Dingleberry Jones, Jeremiah Dingus, Asshead Monroe, Butthead McGillicuddy, Young Gravy, Dumbass McGee, Grover Buttlips, Wesley McStupidface, and, finally, Beta O'Rourke. For more podcasts like True Facts with Robert Bankett, plus exclusive video content, become a Speak She supporter today. To become a Speak She supporter, go to patreon.com/speakshees. That's patreon.com/speakshees. I wish you a wonderful day, and, as always, roll Tide.
We're not in,
Time to check the Speaksies voicemail.
but you can leave a message at the tone.
Hi, Scott. This is John Johnson. How are you? I'm calling you from France, where we like to eat mayonnaise with everything. I think you guys should do the origin of the word mayonnaise on one of your shows. Hope you're doing well. Take care.
If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, call 804-621-5803. And now, back to the show.
So for our final idiom or trope for tonight, knight in shining armor.
I'll be a knight in shining armor.
Is that Peter Cetera?
Yes, it is. From a long time ago. Sorry, that's the first thing I think of. Not to step on if you had any Karate Kid talk. But
No. But I feel like I need to bring Michael McDonald back. We need to have some sort of soft rock battle.
I don't want to try to show up Michael McDonald.
Yeah, no one should ever do
no one
that.
should ever try to do that. But real quick, Peter Cetera update.
Mm-hmm.
I weirdly have that song on a workout playlist. Maybe that's why I don't ever work out, but I've got a lot of upbeat stuff, and then I just randomly have that song because it fires me up, even though it's a soft adult rock song.
It's about the glory of love. I think that's a good reason.
am the man. Come on. I mean, that is, how pumped up does that make you? I mean, it made me pumped up back in middle school, just as pumped up today. It's also a song that I can listen to. I'll never get sick of it. It's just pumps me up every time.
Hey, nothing wrong with Peter Cetera.
Yes, no, not at all.
He's awesome.
He rules. So anyway, I'm so sorry.
It's
All
okay.
you were able to say was knight in shining armor. And I think, by the way, once again, Steve, thank you for bringing over the Dunkin' Donuts coffee. I think it's one of the greatest things, traditions that we have on the show.
It's good.
And it's really kicked in now. So
Very good.
cheers.
Well, you got that, and you got the ex-lead singer from Chicago energy going
Oh,
also,
yeah.
so that's
Woo.
a good thing.
Yep.
So just like Peter Cetera shows up as a hero in our story here, let's talk about another type of hero, the knight in shining armor, the complement to the damsel in distress.
Yeah.
So going to our friends at the Phrase Finder, what is the meaning of knight in shining armor? According to them, a knight in shining armor is a person, usually a man, who comes to the aid of another, usually a woman, in a gallant and courteous manner. So when you hear this, I mean, I instantly think of King Arthur and Camelot and knights, and you can almost like see it, very visual with that. Something that also, like Damsel in Distress, is kind of like a trope.
Yeah.
I think you alluded to earlier, Joseph Campbell and the Hero of a Thousand Faces. It's kind of the standard story and character. The earliest reference that Phrase Finder could find from this comes from the late 18th century in the British journal The Monthly Review, in a poem called Amusement, a Poetical Essay by Henry Pye. No more the knight in shining armor dressed opposes to the pointed lance his breast. So if he's in armor pointing his breast at someone, I guess he's really confident in that armor.
Yeah.
But
I was kind of surprised that it was that late. It was the 1800s because the concept has been around for so long.
Yeah.
But I guess that's why the term kind of sticks is when he says that, you're like, oh yeah, that's the great that's a great description of the hero.
So I think a great example of a knight in shining armor is the legendary St. George from the story of St. George and the Dragon. And this is a story that we'll talk about, is very ingrained into history, but one for some reason I really didn't know until I had children, and it came up in a children's storybook that I really got to read the story and understand it, and then to learn the history and how it's very critical to the history of England. St. George is actually England's patron saint.
Okay.
So the story, are you familiar with the story of St. George and the Dragon?
No, I'm not.
Well, you're about to be. So paraphrasing from the Catholic Encyclopedia, the story of St. George is pretty straightforward. There's a knight that is traveling looking for villains to vanquish, comes across a city that seems to be ravaged. There's pestilence all around, and he uncovers that there's a dragon in the area that's been eating people, and they've been feeding it humans by lot. And now the lot has fell to the king's daughter. So the good knight finds her on the way, finds out where she's going, is impressed by her courage, and then fights and defeats the dragon. Beats the dragon, goes back to the city, gets married. Pretty good story.
It's a good story. And to bolster my point from earlier, you said he was impressed by her courage, right? I mean, so she was also not just this piece of property that was
right.
Not to harp on that, but
Yeah.
I mean, really, even in this ancient story, she was a good character as well.
Right. And going back to the idea of an ancient story, not a lot of in the time of King George or St. George, pardon me, not a lot of female knights just weren't the roles that were available there. Not a lot of choices for that. It would be seen as inappropriate. So St. George, I think, resonates because it's again kind of going to the idea of a trope. It's pretty direct. There's a knight that shows up. He's looking for evil to vanquish. He finds an innocent person who's sacrificing themselves. Someone who is pretty clearly a good person.
Yep.
And fights and defeats an evil that's an evil I think no one would defend the dragon. The dragon causing pestilence is a bad thing, and take him out. So St. George, the story has resonated so much that the red cross in the middle of the Union Jack flag is actually the cross of St. George. It comes from his flag and banner. So still resonates today. A good story. I think it was a good story to share with my kid about bravery and honor on both the parts of the knight and the woman who was willing to give, even though she was royalty, was going to give up her life for her people.
Absolutely.
So to summarize Knight in Shining Armor, it's again, like Damsel in Distress, a trope that everyone seems to know and understand. It's traced back to a poem, just like Damsel in Distress. It's a poem in 1790. And it's something that I think resonates a lot because it's a trope. It's something that people identify with.
Could you put a movie out though right now that was without there being any like extra twist to it, just a straight up story like this, movie like this?
I think not maybe directly as much as before. And I think part of that, I would say look at this in a positive way, that there's more of an audience for people to see female protagonists in the hero's role. And I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
I think
of
a very
course.
good example is The Force Awakens with that. But I think that something gets lost in all this as we try to overanalyze things and, impose value. Again, as the hammer, taking your political theory and whacking it on everything. It's something that gets lost that it's needed to drive the plot. But there's also a reason that these tropes are used over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
They work. They appeal to people. They appeal to men and women. There's a reason why you and I don't get together and have a rom-com night.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing wrong with that, but there's an appeal to that. I remember you told me an anecdote about somebody who'd gotten furious that there wasn't, I think, a pink toy for their son.
Yes.
And the reason there wasn't a pink toy for their son is generally boys don't like to play with pink toys. It's not ingrained in them by anything other than who they are. It makes me think of a quote from the comedian Jeff Dye. My favorite thing about a woman is that she's not a dude.
Yeah.
Men and women are different, and there's a reason why things like this resonate and are used. They work, and they're practical also. The idea of the living MacGuffin, you need a reason to carry the story. Mm-hmm. And, there was, Anita had mentioned earlier in her thing, this is an easy way for developers to tap into adolescent male power fantasies. Mm-hmm. That was a way, that's her perspective. I think it resonates with people. People like those stories because they don't look at the damsel in distress as a weak woman. They look at it as the protagonist is affected by someone he cares for, that he wants to take care of.
Right.
There's positive and negative ways to look at that, I think. And, I think about in modern times as a father who has a daughter, do I want my daughter to be raised as a damsel in distress? Mm-hmm. No. And I don't raise her as a damsel in distress. I raise her to be independent, to take care of herself. She doesn't need someone to come rescue her and fix things for her. But do I want the boys around her to not want to be knights in shining armor? I think we're missing out on something that it's a good thing. It's a positive thing to encourage in people to be chivalrous, to take care of people. It's not weakness, it's respect. I was raised that you open doors and you walked on the outside of sidewalks, not because somebody's weak, because it's a sign of respect. It's all, and I think, how you look at it too. Yeah,
no, that's a great point. And as a father to a daughter also, I had never thought about it that way, but that's so true. I don't want some, I want guys that if there are going to be guys in her life that are the type that would want to be chivalrous. Yeah. And that's kind of goes back to the beginning of this where it all starts with chivalry. So yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
So we start with chivalry. Mm-hmm. We have some glizzy gobbling in the middle. And we end with chivalry. I think that's a good story arc for our journey, for our trope.
Yeah, there's not really, I guess we could have done Glizzy Gobbler in the hot dog episode, but that would have been too on the nose.
Too much pig anus.
Well, we want to thank you so much for listening to Origin of Speaksies. Do us a favor, check out, we have a website, which is speaksies.com, and our social media at Speaksies. That's for Twitter and Instagram. It's a great way if you follow to get in the conversation, give us some recommendations for words or phrases you'd like to hear, and you can always email either Steve or myself at Steve or Scott at speaksies.com. And Steve and I are getting ready to record a post game, which is our video after show we do. And if you want to see that, you can do that by going to patreon.com/speaksies, and any amount you want to give will grant you access to those videos as well as exclusive podcasts like Animals That Suck, True Facts with Robert Bankett, and Personal Records. Thanks again, and Bob's your uncle.
Watch out for bears, and kale is from the devil.
It's like a knight in shining armor from a long time ago. Just in time I will save the day. Take you to my castle far away.
Speaksies.